Hi. Last semester, I took a class where we had to develop games with other classmates. There were two games we'd help create, each with teams of about 6 people, taking about a month and a half. At the beginning of the semester and halfway through, we had to give pitches of games that we could potentially work on. After the pitches, we would rank which ones we wanted to work on, and the professor would have the final say on who worked on what. I believe there were 17 people in the class, so 3 out of the 17 pitches both times ultimately got chosen and made into video games for a total of 6 completed games by the end of the semester. There were also themes we had to work within. The first project, we could either choose the theme Signals or Grace Under Pressure, both Rush songs. I tried to incorporate both. This was my first video game pitch that I gave at the beginning of January. So the title, the working title, is Galactic Heist. And the narrative is that in a galaxy where powerful kings hoard most of the wealth, you were caught stealing. You will be put on trial in 3 days, and if you can't steal enough in that time to pay off your obviously corrupt lawyer, then it's off with your head. So just don't get caught again. So the gameplay loop is that there are 3 days for the game. Each day you can choose a palace to rob. Each palace is a maze of rooms and corridors that contain many valuables. There's also guards and security cameras and other obstacles that you have to avoid. Steal as much as you can before sunrise, and then large, valuable items trigger an alarm which only gives you a minute to escape till the authorities arrive. If that happens, it's game over. So the mechanics is that it's a first-person perspective. There are timers. There's one for the sunrise. There's another for the trigger alarm. There's a limited amount of flashlight battery. So this incorporates both themes of Grace Under Pressure and Signals. There's a small inventory. There's weight and stamina for sprinting. So of course, more items carried means you have less stamina. You can't run as far for as long. The palaces are intentionally crafted rather than procedurally generated, and the game is single player. So the aesthetics of this game, these, by the way, are screenshots from the game Neon White, which I took a lot of inspiration from the design from. It'll be fully 3D, first-person perspective, very clean, pristine, with minimal detail, which allows for high readability and contrast, and then a heavy emphasis on color to differentiate between the palaces. So I wanted the palaces to be styled after feudal European, East Asian, and Arabian palaces, and have different color schemes for each. So for example, like purple and gold for the Arabian palace, white and blue for the European palace, and then for an East Asian palace have green and reds, and then maybe a little bit of gold. That was what I was thinking anyway. Flashlight to illuminate the dark areas, and then the galactic setting was chosen for the design potential, not only of level design, but also in the way that the entire aesthetics and narrative could be formed. I thought could be pretty interesting. There are stretch goals, so obviously we only had a month and a half to make this game. These were features that I deemed non-essential but would be fun to implement. A leaderboard for speed running, which would encourage replaying and beating friends' times, and there would also, maybe be a global leaderboard. Found the leaderboard on Neon White to be pretty fun, beating my friends' times on that. There would be different enemies with different behaviors, so some would be fast, slow, cause a variety of different effects that would give more variety to the different levels. That, of course, would require much play testing, which we didn't have a lot of time for. The replayability, we would have ways to make runs different other than like just choosing different palace order and routes with each playthrough. So I was thinking power-ups or other modifiers that could either be purchased in between heists or purchased in between the days, almost like a roguelite, just to give some more variety in different ways in which you could play through the game. The technology, the main technology would just be a PC with a mouse and keyboard or a standard dual stick controller. So the thing is with this, our professor said, he encouraged us to make an alternate control scheme, like a controller we could make ourselves, or like a makey or something like that. Said, it'd be great if you showed this to a potential employer and they were like, whoa, you made a game with this new unique control scheme. That's so cool. One of the teams actually did this, and they made a radio that they hacked. They put a microcontroller in. It took them a ton of time. Ultimately, all that time they spent on making that radio controller, not only did they not spend making the game, but also gave them immense difficulty because they couldn't always have it to playtest with or to tinker with because there was only one of those controllers. And the functionality of the radio controller, which you could use to change the in-game radio stations, was already implemented into like the arrow keys on the keyboard. So you didn't even really need that controller to begin with. And so there were a lot of people for this first pitch that pitched using alternate controllers or control schemes that they would make. And then basically no one did for the next series of pitches because, like, why would you spend all that time when you could spend more time on the game, and then you would be guaranteed to have the playtesters and the developers have either a mouse and keyboard or a controller. And for any people who played afterwards, they're not going to be able to have that unique controller. But I digress. So anyway, the inspirations for this game, the original inspiration was actually Teardown, but then I realized as I was brainstorming this concept more that it had more in common with Lethal Company, which I was playing a lot at the time. Lethal Company was an inspiration for its scavenging. It had a 3-day limit. It had sunset, right? And then you had to meet a quota by the end to, get as much value out of the stuff you collected. And then there's Teardown, which was an inspiration because it was a heist game where you steal stuff, and there's a time limit after an item is stolen. It, of course, has intentionally crafted levels, and it's mostly known for its destruction, and the fun comes from intentionally destroying to create an optimal route. This War of Mine was also an inspiration for its scavenging, the intentionally crafted levels, and then each night you can choose which location to go visit. And then Neon White for its levels crafted for speedrunning, had leaderboards, and it had very strong visual design in my opinion. So, that was my game pitch. It did not end up winning. I told the professor I might end up making it myself, and he told me out of the 17 pitches, there were 7 that people really rallied around, and he had to choose from those. For me, being able to brainstorm this entire concept in about like 5, 7, maybe 10 minutes, I think that it was still one of the strongest pitches in terms of being a complete, cohesive, and original game. By cohesive, I mean that all of the elements from the gameplay, the mechanics, the setting, the narrative, the art, they'd all work really well with each other. Part of the reason I think I was able to do this was because I could pull different elements from different original indie games that I liked and see what would fit with each other to make a satisfying new experience. I also made sure that a project like this could be completed in a month and a half by 6 inexperienced game developers just working on this for a college course. The game I ultimately ended up making for this first half of the semester was called Bronze Swan, which you can go and get on my itch.io page. Ironically, the girl who came up with this pitch actually wanted to work on my game idea the most. And despite me not being a huge fan of beat-em-ups, by the end of development, this game really started to come together into something I find fun. I was mostly in charge of the level design for level 1, where I tried to teach players the main mechanics, and I was also in charge of the technical art, especially for the environments. We took a lot of inspiration from Paper Mario. I'm still really proud of this game concept, and would like to make it someday. I also had another game pitch that I made nearly 2 months later, which I'll make a separate video about. So stay tuned for that, and all the other videos I'm going to make. And to do that, you can subscribe. Thank you to my patrons, as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.